All right, so we are on chapter 11. So the last thing that we read was Gerda had that fight with Anna, and Anna said that they can't be friends anymore. And then Gerda looked up and saw her dad doing that same dance again, and she knew that she needed to just walk away. So, chapter 11. Over a week later, Anna still wasn't speaking to me. She blames us for what Peter did. I said to Fritz as we walked to school, "It's like we're not even friends anymore." "You're not." Fritz spoke sharply at first, and then drew in a deep breath. "Just be patient, Gerda. Their family is in a lot of trouble." "But that's not my fault. You don't know what it's like to face the Stasi." Even after a week, he hesitated before naming them, and I wondered if the bruise they'd given him was nothing compared to other wounds that maybe couldn't be seen. "Anna understands it now. If they told her to avoid our family, then that's what she's gonna do. It's her only choice, really." "If they told you to avoid me, would you?" I asked him. Fritz chuckled and rubbed my head. "Avoid you? Don't be silly. You and Mom are the only reasons I'm still here." I laughed along with him, but not really. I knew a part of him had meant exactly what he said. In the days since coming back from the Stasi, something about Fritz had changed. He was working fewer hours, or maybe not even working at all. I wasn't sure. He blamed his mood on the rainy spring weather, but I felt certain there was more to it. He was spending more evenings at the youth clubs playing table tennis and had gone to the theater on a couple of nights with his friends, even though he admitted the movies weren't much for entertainment. I did notice him combing his hair more carefully before he went out. Maybe he had a girlfriend. I hoped she liked moodiness because that was also a part of the new Fritz. Since I didn't have Anna for company, and since I figured making friends with anyone else would just infect them too, I took up reading and went through books so quickly that the librarian said she wondered if I would end up reading all the books the library contained. I doubted that. I made it a point to avoid the books that sounded too preachy, although I did check them out now and then in case the Stasi wanted to add my book choices to their secret files. And there weren't many books I really wanted to read anyway. A lot of shelves that had once been filled were empty now, because books make people think. The GDR wanted to be sure it was their kind of thinking. Mama seemed to like the idea of me reading, since she knew I would be safe at home while she was at work, and she definitely liked Fritz doing more with his friends. She thought it meant we would eventually become more settled into our lives here. Mama still didn't know anything about the files. Both Fritz and I had decided that wouldn't do her any good. Nor did she understand that I had too much of my father in me to ever be settled in my life here. I was so much like him. In fact, that I hoped he would understand why I avoided the route to and from school that would take me past the platform. I figured if the Stasi were watching us, the worst thing was for them to see my father up there, dancing out the lyrics to a song, while I tried to figure out what it meant. I wasn't sure if I wanted to figure it out. Whatever secret he buried before he left, I doubted it was worth the risk of digging it up. Our father didn't need any more trouble, and that was all we'd get if I did understand his dance. But mid May, the whispers of summer were growing. School would be out soon. We'd have time to run and play like children should, and the weather was becoming so perfect that it felt like torture to be inside, which was exactly my attitude late one afternoon as the temperature in the apartment became unbearably warm. I had opened the windows, and the breeze was perfect enough that I put on my shoes to go outside. Mama didn't like me to wander alone on the streets while she was gone, but this was the middle of the day. I felt perfectly safe. I had just finished buckling up my shoes when I heard a scuffle going on in Herr Krause's apartment next door. He wasn't alone, and something was wrong. Through the thin walls of the apartments, I heard him cry out for help, and I darted into the hallway. I wasn't exactly sure what I should do, but there were always people down the street. Perhaps I could run downstairs and bring someone back to help him. He cried out again, and then something crashed against the door. Hold on! I yelled. I'll get the police! His door opened, and Eric Krause collapsed onto the floor in the hallway. His head was bleeding, and he was groaning. Two men followed him through the doorway and grabbed him by the shoulders. We are the police, one of them snarled at me. Go back inside. No, they were the Stasi. Their greenish gray uniforms and the square and compass emblem on their hats were dead giveaways to their identity. The question was, why had they come for our neighbor? What has he done? The question fell from my mouth before I could think better of it. Surely they had made a mistake. Eric Krause wouldn't swat a fly without feeling guilt. But they began dragging him away without answering. Two more Stasi left his apartment next. The smaller of them pushed past me to clear the way for his companion, who was carrying an armful of books, papers, and what appeared to be rubber stamps. It was a child's play set. I used to have one just like it, in fact, so I couldn't think of any reason Eric Krause should have it, or why the Stasi would be interested if he did, unless it wasn't being used for play. A gust of wind came from my apartment door and blew into the hallway. It caught a few papers from the officer's hands and scattered them on the ground. Without thinking, I just reached down to pick them up. Sure enough, the printing on them was stamped with a message that looked as if it had been hand carved into the stamp. If I cannot speak what I think, then it's a crime just to be me. That's what the stamp said. Despite its promises of a free press, the state controlled all printing machines and wrote the stories for the newspapers to publish. No citizen was allowed to write his own ideas if they differed from the state message, and certainly it was against the law to distribute those warnings. That is just crazy. But that's exactly what Herr Krause had done. He had carved a political message into children's toy stamps, and in so doing had risked years of imprisonment. From what I knew of Stasi prisons, there would be no public trial and he would have no opportunity to defend himself. His interrogators would stop at nothing before he signed a confession for whatever crimes they decided he had committed. In effect, Eric Krause's life was already over. Give me that paper, the shorter officer ordered me. Something about him seemed familiar, though I couldn't quite place him. Let her read it, Eric Krause shouted from the end of the hallway. Why is the GDR so afraid of letting its people think? But the officer shoved me against the wall, and in the moment when our eyes met, I whispered, I know you. He was a friend of Fritz's, or used to be years ago. When I was very young, he used to ride me around on his back like a pony. Didn't he remember that? Didn't he know me too? He reached for the paper, but for some reason I clutched it to my chest. He raised a hand and slapped me hard across the cheek. I gasped as it knocked the breath from me, too. Then someone shouted, That's my sister! Please stop! Suddenly, Fritz was at my side. He apologized to the officers and grabbed the paper from my hand. When Fritz went to give it to the officer holding me, his eyes widened. Victor? That was his name. I remembered it now. Victor clearly recognized my brother too, but in an instant his expression hardened again and his grip on my shoulder tightened. Fritz reached out a hand to me, but Victor wasn't loosening his hold. I shuddered inside. Was I going to be arrested too? Fritz's voice remained calm. Victor, let her go for the sake of our friendship. Finish with the girl and come, Victor's companion called. After a final squeeze on my shoulder, he shoved me toward Fritz and said, The Stasi have no friends. You'll be joining us soon. You'll find out. Once they left, Fritz hauled me into our apartment and locked the door behind us. What were you thinking? He yelled. I heard Eric Krause calling for help. Printing a paper can't be such a bad crime, is it? It's not up to us to determine his crimes or to help him. Fritz slumped on the couch, closed his eyes, and massaged his temples as if a sudden headache had come on. In a quieter voice, he said, Victor and I used to be friends. He was a good guy. Once. I sat beside Fritz, feeling as exhausted as he looked. Is that what will happen to you after you go to the military? Fritz only sat up and stared blankly back at me. Yes, I think it's exactly what will happen. Answer the question on Google Classroom. Who is Victor?